on stage, we have Rainer Merkel, who is the general partner at HV Capital. We have Uli Grabenwarter, who is head of equity investments at the EIF. Kinga, with a surname that's going to challenge my Polish, Stanisławska, who is the founder of European Women in VC, and Deepali, who is partner at female diverse founders Speedinvest. So with all of these here, I'm going to take a seat. May I just ask you to move down? I like to be on the edge, only because then I can see everybody. And of course, as always, this is going to be an interactive session. I've got questions prepared, but I know that plenty of you will have questions as well. So just keep your hand up, and one of the hosts who are not currently in the room will see you and bring a mic to you. And when they're not in the room, we will just find a way for your question to be asked. So, everything has gone quiet. I want to start with you, Uli, given that you are with the EIF, and I want you to tell us a little bit about the title of this, which is Seeing the Unseen. I want you to... It's a good title, and I was thinking about the title, and if the ultimate game in equity is equity in VCPE and the other teams, what parts are unseen?
I think most of it, actually. Most of it is unseen, because if we look at the topic of gender diversity, equity, female, male, in the industry, it looks like we are debating something that has been starting probably 2 decades ago. And whilst in the context of diversity today, we ought to discuss many, many more dimensions to diversity than just gender diversity, it seems like in this industry, we're still very much stuck with this topic. And we are still very much attached to data points. We are still very much attached to discussions of whether we need quota, whether we need imposing rules of enforcing gender equity or not, whilst actually the context of diversity has actually grown much more than this in the meantime. And I think if we are still attached to those data points, then I think the real thing that is unseen is the cultural change that we need to go through. Because if you go after data points and criteria and compliance with rules, it means that we haven't changed the culture, because otherwise we wouldn't need all that. And I think that's the part that is unseen for me.
Okay, that's very interesting, given that one of the other panels we'll have this afternoon is all about data and reporting, and the fact that you can manage change through looking at data. But you also mentioned about the change in culture necessary. So then I'll jump to you, Kinga, because you've brought out your 3rd European Women in VC report. And to quote you, it shows that, I mean, I think everybody in the room knows it, mixed gender investment teams show higher returns on managed funds. Hopefully sound will settle itself. Management teams, mostly comprised of women, outperform men by nearly 10%, and the higher proportion of women in European VC senior management teams, the lower the volatility of the returns, etc. So, 3rd report. Take us back to the 1st report and why you even started this, and then talk to us about what you've seen change from 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, the whole idea actually started when I raised a VC fund with another woman. And for us, because we both came from financial backgrounds, it was normal that we were in a minority situation, so not big deal. We were in Poland, and there's lots of female bank CEOs, not a big deal. But then we started wanting to build international relationships, find follow-on capital, just have a network. And what we learned was, just across the border, there's very few women GPs. And we thought, well, okay, let's do something about it. Let's get them all together. And actually, the first event we did was we put everybody who was a senior female professional on a bus, literally, going around the Israeli ecosystem. And it was a lot of fun because it's like, you know, on a school bus, everyone integrates very quickly. And if you spend a week together, you know each other very, very well. So that's how we started. And when COVID came, we figured that the good way to do things is to think about the stuff we can do with COVID, which is reports, which is data, which is doing workshops, which is working actually with the European Commissioner. So we talked to Maria Gabriel, who was the European Commissioner responsible for research and innovation at the time, and created a working group of 27 female GPs, each one from a different EU country, and did a white paper and said, look, well, the situation for women in venture is the same in Greece as it is in Sweden. We think of certain European countries as more diverse, as more open, but actually, if you look at numbers, it's very, very similar. So that's what we started. And if we fast forward now 3 years, we want to show that, first of all, women don't manage that much capital, because it's not about who has a partner title, it's actually who owns the company, who has shares in the GP, who has real impact on the strategy, and if there's money left, who gets a cut of what's left at the end of the year. So that's one thing. We want to show that funds need to be transparent and they need to let the LP community understand where they're at in terms of diversity. So we're very against this, I don't know if pinkwashing on this stage is the right word to use, but generally against gender washing and minority washing. We were very excited to go out to 600 funds this year and try to get gender data on performance. And I have to say I'm very grateful to over 100 that actually spent probably more than an hour filling in the survey. The survey was very bad because it was detailed. So the way we looked at things is we went literally vintage by vintage to understand who were the decision makers at a given time. We hired IDC, International Data Corporation, to do it. So we wanted to have a neutral partner who will really dig into the data in a proper way. And yes, the results are amazing. But I think what this report really serves is an invitation to transparency. It's an invitation to open up the market, to report more, because there's 500 VCs that didn't respond. So let's try to get more of them in next time. And I think, that's where we want to go. We want to go towards transparency, understanding, and let the LPs, let the money drive the decisions.
And this is the third report, so what changes have you seen?
Well, in terms of female people with a partner title, actually no change. It's always around 15%. Some countries are better than others. Some sectors are better than others. So say in a life science vertical, you will have more female general partners. You will also have quite large funds. A great example of that is JTO in France, which is a huge fund. It's like they started with 500 million, huge success, and 2 women leading. And that's wow, that's wow for Europe. So some sectors are great, others are not so great. What we've discovered is that many women who are general partners are very well aligned with sustainable development goals, even though they don't say so. They're very much aligned with impact, even when they don't say so. So the changes that they make in the portfolio companies actually make the world a better place, even though they don't actually, use this as a marketing line. They don't advertise this. And that's been important for us. And just one more data point maybe, an interesting discovery has been that, of course, female founders are more capital efficient. We don't have the same data for a VC, but I think that a general partner of a VC fund is also a founder. They also have to do the same, they have to go through the same difficult road, actually often a more difficult road, to raise, based on a strategy, on an idea, on a team, a lot of money, a lot of commitments. So, chapeau bas to all those who have done it. But I think women are more capital efficient, and that is great for moments in time where we're resource scarce and where we want real change, where we want to be aligned with those sustainable development goals. We want to be aligned with the Green Deal. We want to be aligned with those priorities. So they're really doing it, maybe not advertising enough.
Deepali, I would like you to tell us, again, to use Uli's word, you've been working in this for a number of years now. The culture that you have experienced, what is it like as a female? What is the culture like, and where have you worked? Has it just been the UK?
No, I worked in the US, but on the venture side only in the UK.
Excellent. So tell us about what the culture is like in the US and the UK.
It's very interesting because I joined Speedinvest as a venture partner 3 years ago. And to be honest, the leadership had already started thinking about diversity, and which is why maybe they brought me on. I think the CEO is very open-minded and quite progressive. Culture in a VC is always the same as the culture in a startup. I think it's super hard, it's super long hours, it's quite male-dominated, the GP. We brought on a female GP many, many years ago, so we're probably slightly different. But at the same time, most of the partners are male at the fund. So I've been leading, I sit on the firm's ESG committee, but leading culture not only from the inside, but I also do a lot of ecosystem development work on culture on the outside, right? I will say that it's a hard nut to crack. Depends on how much support you have from the top. In our case, it's slightly different because I have a lot of buy-in. But I think it's very hard for women. I hear stories. I had in the last 6 months, I think I've had several women call me from VC funds, talking about the culture in their funds. 3 real-life examples. One called me and said, I'm, tried to learn German to fit into this fund, and I've learned the language, and I'm still really struggling culturally to fit in. One said, I was brought in because a male associate left to, begin a company, and he couldn't raise, and now he wants to come back, and they want to get rid of me. Third one said, I used to work with one partner. She was the principal. She's like, I used to work with one partner. I kind of mentioned to the other partner that there's a lot of unconscious bias working with, in him when he meets female-founded teams, and now they want to get rid of me. So they all just call for advice, but I think culturally, VC is a very hard place for women.
Well, they're not very positive stories.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I had to obviously...
I was wondering if we were going to see a progression of positive change.
100%. I think there are a lot of women who are working towards it. I think many women, to be honest, also leave VC and start their own funds because they find career progression hard, right, within their own firms. I think there's a lot of change, a lot of people working on change, including, we have so many micro GPs here. A lot of LPs can drive that change, KFW, for example.
Well, I wanted to come to that, the fact that you've said a lot of women are starting their own funds, because it sounds as though what you've been describing historically, which still exists today, which to my mind is just really, it sounds quite old-fashioned in many ways. It sounds like women are trying to fit into what has been constructed as a male environment.
Absolutely.
And that is not working. It's clearly not working. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of change. And therefore, why are women trying to fit into that? Whereas, where's the compromise ground? Why are women trying to change a personality trait if that's it? Or does it actually attract a certain type of personality?
I mean, 95% of capital is still held in the hands of male GPs, right? So I think LPs can drive a huge change here in terms of when they look at fund managers, in terms of diversity, in terms of how many women are on the investment committee, how many women have carried interest, how many women have ownership. We just brought on a new LP in the UK, and the first question they asked us was around diversity, right? So, and KFW Capital just launched Emerging Manager Program, 200 million for women and diverse managers. So I think LPs are changing, funds themselves are trying to change. We as a fund have made a lot of changes, whether it's women drop off at 30s, when they have kids, because it's an intense industry, right? So we've changed maternity, paternity. We changed recruitment policies to make sure they're broader. We tried to bring in only women, for like 2 years. We're trying to do more on the mentoring, learning development. How do we do more, skills upskilling or skills training for women, to make sure they are, negotiations training or public speaking or confidence. We're doing a lot, so there is change that is happening. But ultimately, I think LPs can really drive a lot of change if they start measuring this stuff and measuring culture, which is a super interesting topic. I'd love to talk about that later.
We'll come.
But I think, just to your question, I don't think there's anything wrong with women leaving a fund and wanting to set up their own fund. I mean, lots of people leave corporates and set up a startup. Why not? It's just that they need to have the LP relationships to be able to raise a fund, and that bar is very high. They need to have their own GP contribution to raise a fund, and that bar is very high. And they need to, well, basically not earn for 2 years and pay costs, and that bar is very high. So what we need is for them to have the same ability from a practical sense to raise those funds, and let them raise the funds. I mean, that's all great. Just let them raise the funds.
And network. Rainer, I want to turn to you because we haven't heard from you yet. I would like you to talk to us, given everything you've just heard, about how at HV Capital you build an environment where, and we heard the phrase this morning, I can't remember who said it, I think it was you perhaps. Yes, it was you. Psychological safety, because if somebody can work in an environmental where they feel where they feel psychologically safe, you get the best out of them. And it sounds, from again what I'm hearing repeatedly, not the most safe of psychological environments to be in. So tell us about EWinVC Capital.
Sure, thank you. And first of all, thanks for having me. We are one of the more, maybe less obvious candidates to be here on stage. Why? Because we are an all-male partner group still, putting the data up front. But I think we are a very good example for the tagline, seeing the unseen, because what you see obviously is at first glance an all-male white partner group. But what you don't see, the unseen, is the change that we're discussing here. And obviously, as most of the generalist funds out there, we realized much too late that diversity is not something that you need to fulfill to access pools of capital or other stuff, but just to make better decisions, to be a better team. Diversity is a key to success. Yes, we realized too late, but we started our own process. And when you look how this change happens, we clearly see that the trailblazers out there, and we have many great examples. I had such good discussions today. Female-led funds, funds investing in female-only teams. Those are the structures and initiatives that will trigger change much faster than other initiatives. So we clearly see those really leading the speed and movement here. Whereas generalists such as us, we just lag behind. We have our legacy, our history, our long relationship, and you won't change those organizations overnight due to many ingredients that were discussed over today, long-standing relationships, long-term orientation, etc. But the change was initiated, and in our example, about 5 years ago, we triggered this change and saying, well, let's not just try to hire for quota, let's not just try to find a female partner that we can showcase to our LPs as well, that we have a more gender diverse partner group. We've tried this obviously, but no success. But let's really address the root causes and not the symptoms. And this goes to your question, because the root causes are not that we just don't have a female partner on board. It's just that you have to first create this genuinely inclusive and open culture. You have to really prove your deep commitment to diversity. You have to showcase that you're investing in allyship and taking these things seriously. And only once you start changing this within the firm, you become such an inclusive, open environment that then attracts the best talent, of which there are so many females. When we look into then our recruiting over the last couple of years, we hired more female investment team members into the team over the last 3 years. And you see this change resulting, which stems from the change in culture within the firms, which is a bit the unseen.
I want to come back to you, Deepali, because you mentioned measuring the change in culture. You also mentioned that you have a dropout rate in VC world when women are hit around 30-ish plus and they start to have children. You also said that the first 2 years are a bit like startup, it's brutal, you work long hours. These things don't go with raising a young family, for either parent actually, but often the load is on the mother in the young years particularly. So how do you address that culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is really addressing the root cause fundamentally. And I think the problem is that 95% of the capital is with big funds. whether it's Speedinvest or HV or, 5% is really with the small. So even if there are lots of small funds who are doing their own, starting their own, rewriting policies is not going to change the world of investing, right? We really need to change funds from the inside. We really need to have those female partners, whether they grow in. And therefore, as an LP, when I'm doing due diligence on a fund, I really want to look at what is the career progression in this fund look like? How many women and minorities do they bring in? And how many women and minorities do they retain? Because the women will leave if they don't feel included, right? So there is going to be that churn. And what is the progression? How many women do they promote versus how many men do they promote, right? So that is quite important culturally. I would also go as far as, and again, I don't know the EIF process as well or the LP process. I've been through one or two more recently, but really dig into, anonymous surveys of the employee population, including men and women. So you have a, somewhat less biased view, and go as far as doing some exit interviews of people who left the firm, men and women, to really understand what the culture at that firm is like, right? Because if you need to slightly be more deep in your due diligence when you're looking at culture, because it's very hard. You don't know how the investment committee, I would sit as an LP in several investment committees to see how their decision-making works, whether a female partner can really or a female principal can really get a deal done. I remember one of my companies was raising, it was a female founder, and she and I had a discussion, and I said to her, Eileen, this deal will be led by a female GP at a fund. I don't see a male understanding this business or wanting to understand this employee benefit business. And she went through several funds and several female principals. Two of them specifically called and said, super excited about this deal, took it to IC, got killed, right? Ultimately, it was a female GP who led the deal. And to be honest, many female partners, many female principals can't get deals done because the ICs are very male dominated. So as all that is unseen as an LP. I don't know how much LPs really dig into these different aspects of a fund before deciding to give money to them.
Uli, I want to talk to you because you're sitting right in front of the Invest EU sign, and I'd like you to talk to us a bit about whether that is working, trying to catalyze change, how it functions, and how it's helping, if it's helping.
Well, whether it is helping, that is probably not up to us to judge, because I think we are in the actor's role. But what it is true is that when we go on a due diligence on any GP, that gender diversity and diversity at large is a topic that we address. And to your point, what effort we undertake to understand a corporate culture in a team, to understand what a career progression there is, to understand what distribution of economics are in a firm, the fairness to that. This is something that we are taking very seriously at EIF. As a matter of fact, my investment teams, unfortunately, I'm excluded from that fun part of the job since a few years because I have to deal with internal strategies and things like that, which is much more boring. But the investment teams that are out there analyzing investment proposals in GPs, they go in one-to-one interviews with virtually everybody that matters in the organization in terms of the investment team. And they go into one-to-one sessions under absolute Las Vegas principle, that everything that is said in the room stays in that room. That's something which we take very seriously, but nevertheless we ask ourselves whether this is enough, because if you are in an environment where there is not a culture where you are psychologically safe, where you are fearless, are we actually getting the answers that are reality, or are we getting the fundraising contribution to the employee in the process? And that is the hardest part of our job. And I've said it more than once to the members in my investment team that when it comes to our job, a degree in psychology is almost more important than a degree in finance. Because if you need to assess that type of team chemistry in a venture that is supposed to last for 10 years plus, getting to see behind the scenes, getting to see the unseen is the difficult part of our job. Yeah.
And to your point, if there are only 1 or 2 women on the team, it's really hard to speak up. Yeah. Do you see what I mean? Because you know that if for some reason something comes out, it's possible. I know you're using Chatham House, but I think it's still coming to happen. I think it's super hard because there are not enough numbers of women in VC funds.
Yeah, we have already one change that we have seen in our own team over the recent years, that our due diligence teams today are much, much more diverse than they used to be 10 years ago. I think in my investment team, we probably are now very close to a 50-50 split in terms of investment professionals. And that obviously also determines the composition of the due diligence teams that go on due diligence and have the interaction with fund managers. And if you speak in an environment where you speak from female to female, it also becomes more easy to open up. But let's not fool ourselves. This is not even half the rent.
Kinga, you want to say something?
Well, you know, when a VC invests in a startup, one of the main things one of the first things they see is the composition of the cap table. So they will know exactly which founder has how much. And of course, it's quite normal for a VC to turn down an investment in a startup if the CTO owns 5% of the company and the CEO owns, I don't know, 90, say, and somebody else owns a bit. It's normal. But what we find is that in the US, for example, the LPs, they're not even, I don't know, they don't even get to the point of asking about the share ownerships of GP. I mean, when they do that, there'll be a negative selection. They won't be chosen to be an LP. In Europe, it's a bit different. In Europe, there is this starting point, but still, they don't ask the questions about the shares. They ask about who gets what carry. They ask about, is it fair remuneration? They still don't ask for the shares.
Women or men, or both?
Generally LPs.
Right. Rainer, I want to come to you because what you were talking about before, you as well, Uli, the pipeline. We need to develop the pipeline also. It sounds not just a cultural issue, but also the women and the type of mentality that woman needs in order to, you know, cut through what needs to be cut through. How do you develop a pipeline?
Well, for us, to be honest, I don't really like specifically those pipeline discussions because, well, on the other hand, I really like them because the pipeline is huge, broad. I mean, there's so much talent, gender diverse, all other angles of diversity. There's so much strong female talent out there. And I think our industry, including us, we did a big mistake by looking at this huge talent market with the wrong search criteria. So basically, we applied exactly the same criteria that we had on our more male-dominated searches, now just looking for female talent. And we were proven wrong for so many years.
Can you give us some examples of those
Well,
searches?
if you look like the classic traits, like as a VC, ideally you have not only a strong academic career, but then a proven entrepreneurial career of setting up as a startup founder, building your own startup, successfully selling it. And then all other personal attributes. Now, I would say academics, personal attributes, checkbox, it's totally gender equal. But the whole entrepreneurship path, it's just, if you then look at the numbers, well, there are only so many women that have already gone through the full cycle of founding their own company, successfully selling it, or winding it down, but taking the learnings. And if you limit your search on this set of people who might not even be interested in joining VC, I think this was a big mistake that we did for too long. And when you then change your perspective on the funnel, then you realize, oh wow, there's so much talent out there that not only fulfills our team criteria, but makes us much better as a team performance because it's much more diverse than just hiring the next successful entrepreneur into our team. And this change we initiated 5 years ago. Our talent pipeline exploded and we recruited hence more female investment professionals to the team over the last 5 years than male. We are now sitting at 30% representation in the team, and it's just a question of time before those female talents get promoted through the ranks, and we can also show this on more senior levels.
Uli, when you and your team are talking to people that you meet who are coming to the EIF and who want your help, do you also talk to them about the culture within their teams, their mindsets? Because all of the evidence shows that diverse teams get the best results financially and every other way. So do you give that feedback as well?
We definitely have an open dialogue about the culture, but I don't think that we go into the territory that is, we say, if you have a diverse team, you have a better chance to deliver better financial results. Because I think that is fundamentally the wrong approach. I think if we have to argue through financial return considerations that we have to include 50% of the human population in our normal business environment, then something is wrong in our head. It is not that, it's a little bit like discussing in the 70s the voting rights for women in Switzerland. I mean, where are we? We are in the 21st century. This is a question of how we approach as a cultural environment the acceptance of the equality between two genders. It is not about one gender having to prove that they deliver 10% better financial results in order to be considered even on the table. I think that is the problem that we are facing. And I think the way we are going about this is precisely not to approach it from the perspective of giving fund managers a checklist or something where we tell them, can you prove that you do no harm? A little bit like ESG criteria, something like that. Mm-hmm. The question that we are addressing is, do female VCs, do female founders, in your investment approach, in your running of your company, in your running of your VC firm, have the same opportunities? It is not about fixing quota that we need to fulfill, because as a matter of fact, if we imposed fixed quota to the VC industry as of today, and given the experience that Rainer has made that everybody needs to have 30 or 40 or 50% of female in the team, we probably couldn't even serve that community from what is available in terms of women that want to move in the industry. Mm-hmm. But we need to have an environment where we give them the equal opportunity to be there. And that is something that we can only do with two aspects. The one is that we communicate the opportunity, that we are actually open for this type of investment, that we are ready to take on the, call it risk. And if I talk risk, it's not in a discriminatory manner that I want to say it, but let us look back for 2 decades. In 2000, when we had the tech crisis, the entire venture capital industry was at the very same point where female VC entrepreneurship and the like is today, because they have been labeled and stigmatized with a level of risk that nobody wanted to touch. And as EIF at that point in time, we stepped in and said, we take the risk to prove that it is a risk that can be taken and actually delivers you very decent financial returns. And we've built this industry for 2 decades. And if we've done that for the entire VC industry 2 decades ago, there is no reason why we cannot take this risk today in order to address an injustice that actually has been prevailing for 2 decades.
I would just question a little bit just I'm not into quotas either, but I just wonder, because we're not at the same leveling field, I wonder if almost setting timely KPIs with, of course you don't want diversity washing, right? But I'm just wondering whether you need to do that, because there's such a huge imbalance and you are the one who holds the purse strings. Do you know what I mean? So if anybody's best place to do it is people who are giving capital to us, because they can actually influence behavior much more than me as a female partner, or, I feel like you almost need to have those figures. You have to say, oh, I will make sure that I'm recruiting the best talent or investing in the best female founders, but I want it to be 30% of my portfolio. I'm investing in the best GPs, but I do want them to be diverse, because I just feel, how do they influence change otherwise? I won't call it a quota, I call it a KPI, just like we have at Speedinvest. We have a small micro GP program. We say 50% of that money is going to go into first-time female micro GPs, right? And we are going to nurture them. There's one in the audience, Fund F. I chair the investment committee. I spend time with those GPs because we want to change and influence the landscape, right? So I'm not calling it a quota, but you need to have some numbers to be able to change things.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Deepali. Because I think we're so far away from where we want to be. We need to find any mechanism to move this forward. And a quota is just a word, right? We can implement this in different ways. But I think Europe is so heavily taxpayer funded in the VC space that it is policy that can do a lot in Europe. It's different in other countries or other geographies. It's not necessarily like this. But Europe is quite special in its way, and I think it's an awesome job what has been done under Invest EU. It's a great step forward for the first time, really, and you know, I'm very happy to have seen that happen. And I think that, you know, there should be then a next step.
So, I mean, we need your mail replies to this.
And please don't get me wrong, because I think male allies play a huge role.
Well, he
in a
sounds
woman's
like
success.
an ally. Yeah,
You know,
I'm going to come back to you.
I wouldn't be doing what I was doing if it wasn't for Oliver, you know, who's our CEO. He's a huge male ally to me.
And I think that's a great point, and I would actually like to get away from the word quota and rather call it KPI. No, and I think it's very important to have this data to just be able to showcase where our industry stands, and all the KPIs clearly show we are not quite yet there. We're actually very early on in leveling the playing field. Now, maybe it's worth just switching perspectives a bit and talk about why we are actually discussing so hard about those issues, because in the end, what we're talking about an almost negligible number of people in a workforce in a very special industry. But that's not the point. No, I mean, fixing the gender equality in our little industry will do little to the overall ecosystem. So hence, we are very well aware of the change that we are doing. The main motivation is that we all agree that diversity increases healthiness of society, healthiness of business. It has very widespread effects, and we need to fix the equality in the broader ecosystem. Now, if a purely male team would achieve the same effect in their investments and providing equal opportunities in their target portfolio companies, we probably wouldn't have such an issue. But it seems to be, the data shows that it's not. So we have to introduce KPI quota to force this development, because this is in the end what we need to contribute. We need to make the change in the broader ecosystem that we can highly impact as GPs, and whether now it's the LP's role to dictate the GPs how they do it, I think that's a delicate discussion.
I know you have can we get a microphone to this lady here? If you keep your hand up. Yeah, Uli.
I very quickly wanted to react to Deepali on the KPIs. If we are talking about KPIs, I'm fully with you. And actually, the approach that we are taking is going even beyond that. Because if we make as an LP a fund investment, the sanction, if you want so, of the KPI is 10 years down the road. We don't have the time to wait for that. And that is the reason why when we assess the credibility of KPIs, we look at those elements of corporate culture. We look at the elements of the interaction with the team members within a VC firm. We look at the interaction of a GP with the portfolio companies and their CEOs, male and female. And actually, we assess that because we need to get a grip on whether the KPI that is put forward to us is again something that looks nice on a glossy private placement memorandum, or whether it is something that actually we can hold a GP over time accountable to.
I just feel that corporate culture is really hard to measure, and I think talking to women who've also left a firm is super important. And again, I don't know if that's the level of detail, because when you're in a position of wanting money, you're going to say whatever you have to say, right? As a partner at a fund, I will never be like, oh, I need that money to survive, right? So, but women who leave, or minorities, or even men who leave, I think it gives you just a broader view on that fund's culture.
We do talk to people that leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to try and take, and we've only got 5 minutes left. It's gone very quickly this time. So I want very fast questions and fast answers.
Okay, I'm Simone Rummelhuis. I'm from Borsky Fund. We had this discussion in the first session on criteria, and I think Reiner made a very special remark in that he said that actually the 30% is reached by you because you have changed your criteria. Not that you decrease your criteria, but you look differently. This morning we actually saw in the track record discussion that when you are a woman and you have 10 years of experience, 6 years as an M&A executive and 5 years in the PE, that this track record is irrelevant. And I think that we really should take a look at that type of criteria that the EIF is now using, because you need to get more women into that space. I'm also a woman who set up her own fund, and we also want to hire the next generation of women. But I'm actually would want to hire that woman with that 10 years experience. I think she would make a great partner in our fund. But if the EIF says that she has irrelevant experience, I'm not going to hire her. And then I'm better hire a guy who is already in one of those mega funds who wants to set up his own fund. And I think that the EIF should really talk with Rainer on why did you set your criteria differently and what that did to you.
I'm not sure if that's a question or a comment.
No,
Statement.
Well, the question is, the question is to the EIF, are you prepared to look at your criteria again and see whether these irrelevant criteria are actually quite relevant to get more women into the VC space?
While Uli replies, I want more hands up. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so who has another question? Uli? Do.
I wasn't at that session this morning, unfortunately, because I was stuck up in other meetings, but looking at track record and investment experience and relevant experience for a team, especially in first-time teams, does not disregard categorically anything that is not related to investment. If that is a statement that has come across this morning, I will address it.
Just one additional remark, and it's totally gender independent. I think there's a psychology in VC funds, including at us, that you are hired by a firm due to your prior experience. But at the moment you enter the firm, this experience is set to 0 and you have to prove yourself over and over again in the very firm, which leads to the effect that basically even if you have 10 years of operating experience, you basically have to prove yourself in this very firm over and over again. So it's maybe partially explaining.
Question on the front row here.
I just have a clarification question because we've had many of these discussions about women potentially being the higher risk investment. And there's something which I find flawed in that, because ultimately it is maybe higher risk, perceived higher risk, because we don't know enough, we haven't yet invested enough. And I find it a very dangerous way of actually categorizing investing in women-led funds as a higher risk side. So I don't know, I'm just putting it out. I also find the data of diverse teams having led to more, to higher financial performance is actually repeatedly shown, and I'm just not sure why the industry doesn't want to use that as a way to encourage more. So I don't know, maybe I misunderstood in this conversation what was happening, but these were two things that I feel are, if we are questioning it, then maybe let's again look at it. But there has been quite a lot of work done on the financial performance and the diverse teams. So that's one thing, and I really think we need to move the conversation away from women are high risk, and we have to now, like VC was high risk, and now women are high risk. I just find that in 2023 a hard one to swallow. So.
Or change the language. We don't need to say higher risk, rather than change the conversation, change the language. We can use different words.
Maybe higher yield. Higher yield.
Higher yield?
That's how we call it in the private sector.
Yeah.
Higher yield.
Unknown quantities.
Can I quickly
Please
clarify
do.
that? Because
yes.
it is definitely not a question that we say that women are more risky in investment than men. It is, if we look at the female community that seeks to move into the venture capital and private equity industry, we have made the observation that they do not have, because of the lacking opportunity, the same history in the industry. And hence, there is the usual assessment of how much risk do you attribute to somebody who has 20 or 50 years or whatever years in the industry compared to somebody who enters the industry. And what I was saying is that we had the same debate for the entire venture capital industry just after the technology crash in 2000, because everybody started from scratch. What we have achieved meanwhile is that 50% of the population had the opportunity to prove for 20 years that they can do it. And we have got the other 50% of the population who has been denied this opportunity. And that is the reason why we need to today take the same level of risk in quote marks that we've been taking 20 years ago in the entire industry in order to make the unconsidered half of the population today accessing the same opportunities that we gave the others before.
Well, you've sort of proved your point. It works. It worked for half the population. It'll work for the other half. So there's no issue. Now, in Sifted, there's articles. This is the last point, really. So I want very, very short answers. They released a couple of articles this summer. One is that Nenad Maravat of DN Capital, well, he didn't have a great story. So that was an awful story, very difficult culture that he had. A lot of women spoke up after and for that journalist in that article. He wasn't, by the sounds of it, a terrific leader of his team. And we have another article from Sifted in August saying that European VCs are seeing an exodus of women investors. So my point really is not about individuals, but if you're having an exodus of women investors, what can happen from now until this event potentially happens next year so that these articles no longer exist? 2 sentences.
I mean, media always sensationalizes, sorry to say that, but no. I do think there's a problem. I think lots of people are working on this problem. Some of those women left to start their own funds, which is great, right? As long as they can fundraise. I think culturally, the industry needs to change.
You think there was nothing wrong with the way he led?
I mean, I don't know anything about him. I did not read that article. I read the one which mentioned the women leaving. But yes, there needs to be a cultural change. There needs to be, I mean, I say this over, I feel like a broken record since I've said it for like 8 years now. I think the culture at the funds need to change. The leadership at the top needs to recognize that diversity is important. LPs can really drive this change. LPs can really look at culture. LPs can say, I'm not going to give you money unless you change things, unless people are, women are leaving, then I'm not going to give you money. Tell me why these women are leaving. Tell me what you're doing to encourage them to stay. Tell me what you're doing from a learning and development, career progression standpoint. LPs can drive all that change.
Kinga. We'll have a really short question.
My idea would be if you impose an ombudsman person at every venture and growth fund, and probably private equity as well would need this help, you would actually have a way to actually solve what is unseen. Because these numbers don't talk about the behavioral aspects that result in these numbers, result in the exodus. There's nowhere for a female to go to address behavioral issues. Of course, if you're sexually harassed as completely, you go to the police maybe, but the daily undermining that results in these statistics, there's no way to address them. And the EIF and all of the LPs, if they would impose from one day to another an ombudsperson just to listen, to capture this, I think that could actually solve things relatively quickly.
Or an EIF person that you can just reach out to. Do you know what I mean? I don't even think a lot of small funds can't have this, right?
Time, so Kinga.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, VC is a very, very difficult place to be. I think we all understand that, and we all share this view in this room. Or I guess the vast majority of us share this room. Now, what can we do? We need to work together, we need to network, because we need to think about VC as an industry that really delivers the products and solutions of tomorrow. And an industry that where that VC money goes, those companies are the ones that are going to do better, they're going to survive, and they're going to build a society that either we want to live in or we don't. And this is why we need the women to survive in this industry, because they need to invest in those female health startups that get 4% of R&D money, because as a result, women are misdiagnosed, because as a result, women are dying. That is why we need this. Not because, we're sitting in a room and talking about a quota, a number, or a KPI. No, we need a society that actually all of us want to be part of and want to live in.
Really.
To your question, Lisa, what will have changed a year from now when we're looking at the third generation for empowering equity? One statement I can make in that respect is from those ladies that are cited in the article of having left the industry for reasons of culture, climate, and things like that, we will have at EIF talked to each of them that wanted to talk to us, because that is a resolution that we've taken, that we are going to reach out to them to understand the dynamics and the reason why this happens and what we can draw from that for us. On the point of the other sifted article that you have mentioned, which is linked to the situation in Andean capital. We are an investor in that fund. We are very close to the action that is going on around this case. We are going to take a very close look also at the official investigation that has been launched for that with an external firm. But this is something that I'm going to discuss when this is concluded, and our action as EIF, if any is required, will be known anyways because of our situation in the industry. But the other point that I would like to make to that thing is coming back to the cultural debate that we had. It shows in the most pertinent way that you can imagine how important diversity at the top of the firm actually is. Because imagine what would have happened to that story if DN Capital had only one single female partner at the top. Would it have been a situation where female people that feel being mistreated or whatever in the organization had to go outside in order to be heard? Would it be a situation where this could not be seen by other partners if it had happened? Those are questions that I think relate to a corporate culture that you can build as a firm, and I think that's the point with which I turn to Rainer. When they are looking for the diversification of their top layer of the organization, that is where tangible value becomes even visible and noticeable for the GP itself, well beyond the question of whether the LP is looking at making an investment in a gender diverse investment firm or not.
Rainer, final word.
Yeah, whereas I hope it, I think we need more than a year to be able to show that. But coming back to your framing of the question, what will happen what should happen in the next year? I think the most negative things I heard today was, first, female partners don't get their deals done. Second, apparently female talent leaves the industry, and that in some firms there's even misconduct. And my sincere hope, first of all, I can deeply condemn those three facts and deny for our firm. And I hope that next year there's not even a need to discuss those things anymore. Probably a year is a little bit of time for that. But I hope that those stories will only be uncovered from the dark past of our industry, and that over the next year we can actually reveal positive stories, show proof of the change in movement, in philosophy, in the firms, and talk about the positive stories that come out of this movement.
Thank you so much to our panel. Thank you very, very much indeed.